views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
On camera too, and then I'm going to talk. Hey there, good evening. It's time for the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to journalists and writers and authors and then filmmakers and photographers, anybody really putting stuff out in the Bronx so you can find out what they're thinking about, what they're talking about before they put it out or during they put it out or after they put it out. And this evening we're going to go two different directions. We're going to start off with a longtime Bronx filmmaker, longtime friend of mine, Anton Evangelista. Nice to have you with us.
It's a pleasure to be back, Gary.
Yeah, we were talking while you weren't here about it. It's been a long time,
yes.
And he's been very, very busy. Little background, so people will know who you are. You grew up, you came to the Bronx from Italy. Start there.
I was born in Matera, Italy, and my family moved here when I was 4 years old. Grew up in the Bronx, longtime Bronx resident, artist, filmmaker.
Still lives in the Bronx, he told me.
Yes, absolutely. And you and I met because I made a film called Intervention, which this year we're celebrating our 15th anniversary of that film.
Which tells you how long we know each other.
Yes,
So
yes.
we go back 2004, but go ahead.
You were very supportive at the time, extremely supportive.
I can't imagine, but
no.
Yes.
We brought so many of the folks that are in the film
on the show. I remember that, yeah.
And it was a great, great time. So we're re-celebrating the...
So that's coming up 15 years since Intervention.
Right.
But you've been making films all along the way, and that's been your passion.
Yes. I'm a storyteller. I always tell people making films is telling stories, and it's how well you tell a story. And you bring all the elements together.
The inspiration from people say, how do you choose what goes on Bronx Talk, the other program I have on BronxNet, and the Bronx Buzz? And I say, I open up my window and I look out. You are inspired by the borough of the Bronx constantly.
Oh, totally, totally. All of my films are somehow interconnected with this great borough. My latest film is a film called Signor Jackson, which is about an African-American family that moved into an all-Italian neighborhood, and the youngest child was embraced by this community, learned how to speak Italian in this Bronx neighborhood, and ended up becoming a teacher of Italian and an example of biculturalism and bilingualism. So
and we're going to show the trailer in just a couple of moments. When I saw the trailer, I was like, you don't look Italian. And when you and I were talking about the
Yes.
beautiful diversity of our borough and everything else,
Yes.
and so we can be upfront about it because we know people have all different nationalities. I want to just rewind the clock a little bit because you told me, and I cut you off beforehand, you said you were inspired by your own father and
Yes.
you had done a documentary. I want to explore that and use that as a way to understand how you see the world and what you think is important to portray on film.
Well, my father also is an example of an immigrant, who brought all his family and his dreams and relocated to a strange new land called Bronx, New York in 1966. And so I made a documentary film entitled Umberto E. Umberto was his name. And that movie changed my life. It gave me a whole new direction to go into. And after I made that film, that film is really a story about love and forgiveness because my father had a tough childhood. So he could have been a very angry man later in his life, but he didn't. It was all about love and bringing forgiveness and bringing love and humor.
Right. I want to get back to that line that you just said, that it changed your life. I'm going to follow up
Yes.
and say from what to what, or how did it and why did it change your life?
Well, my father was a very special man. So I felt he needed his story. He was kind of like an unsung hero. So I needed to really put the light on him. And by telling his story, it changed my life. And I started to learn about other unsung heroes out there who never really saw the light of day. And so I started to learn. As I was learning, I decided to make films on...
Wow. How long ago was that?
Well, the film on my father was made about almost 10 years ago. And then after that, you know, I started to learn about, for example, the Piccirilli brothers, who are the sculptors of the lions in front of the New York Public Library.
Yeah, and something called the Lincoln Memorial.
The Lincoln Memorial. And those monuments were built in the Bronx.
In the BX, of course.
And so I said, I didn't know that. So I said, I have to make a movie, even if it's a short film. And it went viral, the movie.
I know that BronxNet had shown it, or
yes.
I mean, BronxNet had helped promote it and all that. How prolific are you? You always making films, or you say back, okay, I'll take 2 months and I'll get back to it?
You know,
and
people ask me that, and I say...
I do ask you that.
The projects find me. I don't know. I really don't know how to explain that.
I believe it was Ralph Waldo Emerson, not that we need to get classic or, you know, too literary on it, who said that genius is, it could have been Williams Wordsworth, excuse me, it was Wordsworth, who said genius is a stream that is flying above us, and creativity, and then all you do is you jump in that
Yes.
stream, and that's, I guess, what you just described.
I
that
totally
once
agree.
you find it, then
Yes.
you're going to float with it.
Everything has to touch you emotionally. It's like a beautiful piece of art or a beautiful song or something. It has to touch you emotionally.
Do you want to, it's a very short trailer, I guess, a little promo clip. You want to introduce it at all? To me, it speaks for itself, because you're going to look and have the same reaction I did. You don't look Italian.
You know, I think we should show it, and then
we can talk about it.
All right.
So here it is, Il Signor Jackson, and we'll find out where you can see it, and you know, we'll keep bugging him so we can see all his work and all that kind of stuff. Here it is by Anton Evangelista.
Thank you.
Buon pomeriggio, potete farmi qualcosa da mangiare? Sì, Eduardo, come no? As a child, and as I was growing up into my teenage years, that I was speaking Italian. Posso parlare con lei? Vattene. But they left out the word dialect. I had a unique experience, the fortune, growing up American, but I was cloaked in Italian biculturalism and bilingualism. And I was able to embrace the best of both worlds.
You know, it is, I'll get a little applause, please. The crew can applaud
Thank
there.
you, thank you.
It is such a Bronx story.
Yes.
It's like, and I wonder how many stories like that there are, that somebody grew up in a neighborhood, maybe a Hispanic person grew up in a Jewish neighborhood, or, you know, we have an African neighborhood, and all of a sudden you feel a part of it. Just talk about it. Go
Again, what I said earlier about stories that the light is not shined on, you know. I mean, here's an example of someone who didn't face the racism, the cross burning in front of the house, the rocks being thrown.
Because he was just part of it. Now, the neighborhood was, I'm just making a presumption, in Belmont?
Bronx River Avenue.
Oh, Bronx River Avenue.
Yeah.
And where do we know?
It's a little further south of Hunts Point section.
So it's not, that also breaks this stereotype, because it's not Belmont or Arthur
No, it's
Avenue.
not Arthur Avenue.
Wow.
No.
Fascinating.
So I said, you know, here's a story I always like to say, it's a story of what's possible. You know, what is possible? I mean, this is a story of acceptance. It's a story of family, friendship. The friends that he had as a child, he's still in touch with today.
I got to tell you, you know, sum total of family, friends, friendship, ethnicity, this is a Bronx story.
It totally
is exactly who we are.
It's a
Wow.
human story. It's
Tremendous.
really a story about love. I mean, it's really a story.
And so let's talk about how long a film is it? I mean, we saw all of 40 seconds. I want to see the rest of it. And then where do we see it? Are you getting an opening? Or like, what's happening?
We had a whole number of screenings just recently. There will be more screenings coming up, but if people choose, they can watch it on Vimeo. It's a free.
Really?
Go to Vimeo.com.
Now I have something to do tonight. Baseball season is over. What am I going to do now? I'll be watching Anton's movies.
Yes.
So you go to Vimeo and you look for Il
Signor Jackson.
Il Signor
The
Jackson.
movie is only 40 minutes long.
Okay.
But it really hits home when you see it. I think.
You know, it's fascinating that you say 40 minutes long. Are you, I hate to put it this way because I'm on TV and we're all bound by, you know, the clock and time and everything else. Are you bound by, like, do you say, I got to make a 40-minute film or I want to make a documentary that can be submitted? You just make what is there.
Yeah.
Boy, a true artist.
Fortunately, I had that freedom, that luxury of deciding how long the film should be, what the content was. You know, I was awarded by the Russo brothers, who are like these directors that I never even heard of. They made a little movie called Avengers Endgame. They started this grant program with NIAF, which is the National Italian American Foundation, and I was chosen as one of 8 filmmakers to tell my story. You know, once they learned who Eddie Jackson was, what the intention was, and I ended up winning Best Film.
Well,
you know,
congratulations. This is your most recent work, right?
The most recent one, yes.
When was it finished?
About a year ago. It was a year ago this month.
So it's going to stay on Vimeo, and that's where people, wow,
Yes.
so you make them and you put them out, and you come on BronxNet television to shout. And so now, as you sit back, and I mean, are we ready to say Anton is already conjuring the next one, or are you waiting for something to come across in the stream? What do you think?
I'm developing some other projects, but the one that I've been thinking about a lot is actually I'd like to make a feature-length film, a dramatic film on my father. You know,
Wow, so it really did inspire you.
yeah, it has all the elements of a great story about, you know, World War II and Mussolini and immigration.
Immigration, and then of course coming to the Bronx and struggling
Coming to the
through
Bronx,
that. Yes,
the
wow.
New York, you know, it has all these great elements.
Anton, we reconnected, and I'm just thrilled beyond belief.
I'm thrilled to be here, Gary.
Yeah, great.
Thank you for being the voice of the Bronx.
There you go, no problem. And so, Intervention's 15th anniversary.
Yes.
And then also, you can see, I'm going to try to pronounce it right, Signor
Signor
Jackson.
Jackson,
Okay,
yes.
and that you can see on Vimeo.
Intervention, we're having a 15th anniversary red carpet screening coming up November 21st. Everyone is invited to come, contact me, and we'll get you.
And how do we contact you?
Comprehensivefilms.com.
Okay,
That's my
yeah.
website.
There you go. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. And you know what happens now? We switch gears. We get into Bronx News with the editor of the Norwood News. David Cruz is here. Don't go away.
Sure, I look cute now, but when my owner lost his job, it was rough. I was living on the street, and one night, me and this Cocker Spaniel got into it so bad, I wound up looking like an ice cream cone. I cried a little bit, but thankfully I got rescued, so I'm running, I'm jumping, all back to my old self. And I'm ready to give unconditional love, even if you put a lampshade on my head.
It's not always easy being a dad.
Do you have panda asthma too? Does that run in the family? This is the home of the most priceless kung fu artifacts.
But when you make an effort,
Dad, we're not supposed to touch anything. Oh, sorry. Go along, son.
it's always worth it.
Whoa, master!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
I am gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
You know what, guys? There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
Hey, it's Ava, and this is Tess from Vivo's Do It Yourselfie, where we recreate the hottest looks from today's biggest music videos.
After cleaning out our closet, we have a lot of clothes we don't wear anymore.
Like this old t-shirt.
It's not garbage, it's actually a brand new rug.
And to make it, all you need to do is cut, tie, and glue.
Cut the t-shirt into strips.
Tie the strips into knots.
And glue the knots to the bath mat. I love it. Give your garbage another life.
And recycle.
Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz, and my good buddy David Cruz, the editor of the Norwood News, is here. Nice to see you, David.
Hi, Gary. How you doing?
It's been a little while. We used to have you practically every week, but now, so I got a long list, and I got a sneak preview of tomorrow's edition or the next day's edition. Let's start over here with Councilmember Andy King. Clearly, the city council is not happy with him. They suspended him. There were calls for him actually to be the first council member to ever be tossed off the city council. Where does that leave the residents of that community? That becomes very difficult because you've got a council member with very little authority now.
Well, right. At the moment, it leaves them without a council member for the next month until until December, because he was suspended for 30 days. It was effective on October 28th. However, when you go into November 28th, it's Thanksgiving, so it really carries over to December. Meaning, though the office is still open, there's still a constituent services unit that handles constituent complaints, except now there's a monitor within the office itself. And the idea is to, according to the council, is to protect the existing employees at the office.
Mm-hmm. You know, there's a part of me, I mean, we both know Councilmember King personally, and there's a part of me that gets the feeling that the council wanted to kind of force him into a position where he would simply resign. I don't think that's in his nature to do that. But he was still very direct about saying, I mean, these are harassment charges, these are charges of conflict of interest, having his own wife being on the payroll allegedly. And he never seemed to say, well, okay, I'm sorry. You know?
Well, but the thing is, I was talking to some people. Why would he want to say he's sorry if he says he's innocent?
Right.
Because then wouldn't that essentially just cause his entire argument to fall apart? To say, yeah, you're right, I'm sorry.
Never bothered the President of the United States.
It's an admission of guilt, and he's just not going to do that, especially now that he's filed a lawsuit against the city.
Oh, he has? I wasn't aware of that.
Right. He filed a lawsuit against the city, essentially saying that the due process was not properly given to him during the course of the investigation.
Wow. And I will say, I mean, I think it's pretty well known. He's a very responsive elected official. He runs all kinds of events, and he's always out there. And I think I mean, in my conversations with him, he has values that are really important to him.
He's very well liked, and I always had said this to other colleagues too, is that if you're a well-liked elected official, sometimes there's this idea that perhaps the employees that work for you are your friends, are the same, or sort of are in the same mold as constituents. It doesn't work that way. And I think, you know, King may have overstepped his boundaries when it came to being a boss having subordinates.
Right.
So.
Well, he certainly, at least according to the allegations, didn't handle him right. David, I think the Norwood News was first in investigating and understanding what the Stag Group was doing. Right. Was it the Post or the Daily News?
Daily News.
Daily News had a story about now they're being investigated by Andrew Cuomo. So Stag is a developer. Talk about what you found, when you found it, and how it relates to the latest revelations.
So our story happened roughly a year ago. We had gotten calls from residents at the Bedford Park Manor who were essentially complaining about conditions within the building. Now, the context here is that the building just opened. Opened meaning like back in 2015. It's supposed to be a relatively new building. But soon enough, we toured the building, me and Joe Koenig. We took a look at
another writer.
Correct, and we took a look at conditions, and the conditions essentially checked out. There was just a lot of poor communication between the management company.
When you say checked out in that advocates were wrong, or checked out in that they were right?
No, that they were right. Yeah,
they were right. You saw some, like, what kinds of things?
Well, there was just the work was essentially just not up to par.
Badly done.
Exactly. The thing is, like, even along the hallways, when I'm banging on the walls, it feels as if like I could just go ahead and just give it one whack, and my hand can go right through the apartment.
Wow. So that's a difficult thing. And so was there any ultimately any relief offered to the building at this point?
They eventually had gotten a super, but it really wasn't your average traditional super that people are entitled to get. It usually was just a porter. And they continued to complain about it. And of course, the Daily News had reported about Stag's management company, its subsidiary, Five Star Management, which had mismanaged allegedly a building in White Plains Road. And so Cuomo opened an investigation. Sure enough, once the Daily News started reporting on the same reports that we had done a year ago, Cuomo had opened up an investigation. Now, what comes out of the investigation remains to be seen.
Of course, time will tell. Yeah.
Stag has completely denied everything, and really kind of just essentially just really they disputed the claims and also really just badmouthed the tenants who are living within their buildings.
The courts will unravel that, of course. To me, if it's a new building, it should be spanking. And I will tell you, the Norwood News has history in this because not too far from that particular spot was PS 20 when that was built. I think I made the joke when you had your 20th anniversary, if it weren't for Jordan Moss, your predecessor at the Norwood News, we might have a building that was sideways because the Norwood News was first at reporting and getting in there and finding out that it was not done properly.
Right.
What would be, I want to move on, but what would be a good, like if you got walls that are like you described, I mean, you'd have to rebuild a building.
Well, this goes into the larger issue of affordable housing within New York City and the fact that if you're building affordable, you're going to get affordable, and it's not going to be quality. And that's really
well, there are some who would dispute that.
Of course.
Statement. In other words, if you're building affordable, therefore you got to build a crummy building.
Right.
That doesn't work for me.
I'm sort of speaking in very general terms.
Yes, I understand.
But usually speaking, when you match up match up a market rate versus an affordable, there's a difference in terms of quality, and it can be seen in Stag's other building, which is right down the street from the Bedford Park Manor.
Which brings up the next thing. I took a long drive, I guess it was about from Bedford Park all the way up to maybe 233rd on Webster Avenue. Mm-hmm. There is a lot of new development there. I guess the knee-jerk question is, are local communities concerned about gentrification, or are these affordable enough so current Bronxites can live there and people are satisfied that these are good new developments? Because the whole strip is essentially been redone.
Well, affordable is a very interpretive word. What may be affordable to you may not be affordable to me. And so there's been this discussion within the neighborhood that right now what they're building is not essentially for the existing population. They're not making that much money. It's essentially working class.
And what are the rents like in those buildings? If you don't know, I don't know
off the top of my head. But essentially,
but there is some concern.
The common complaint is that they're not affordable.
That would define gentrification. This is the balance we go through in the Bronx all the time, is that you want people to come in and spend their money and bring new people in with new income. On the other hand, the housing problems are so desperate that you need housing for people who are living in substandard buildings.
Right.
I mean, that is the question. I thought this is an interesting thing. What does Norwood mean to you?
Right.
The Norwood's Bronx Community Charter School studied Norwood. Tell me about, and that's a story that's currently running in the paper.
It's our front page, essentially, because
I've got the paper copy because it didn't even come out yet. Oh, Here it is. Here it is. This is literally your first look at the Norwood News.
Right, exactly.
It was printed off his printer. Go ahead.
So the Bronx Community Charter School is a neighborhood school within Norwood. They took an unprecedented step in just evaluating everything, the current state of Norwood. And so they had tailored the lesson plans according to grade, and they went from talking for kindergartners, they talked about what are the favorite places to play in Norwood, and then they went to more serious topics, just like the topic we're talking about, which was gentrification. And so the person that you see there in the front page, she essentially wrote a comic book about gentrification within Norwood. And it was just a very fascinating look into the neighborhood. And
what I
really well.
I love about this, and we have this in places throughout the Bronx. I mean, you look at the Bronx Documentary Center that sends kids, photographers out there, young people to learn about their community, that we're getting this impression or giving the kids their impressions of their own neighborhood. I think that's very, very healthy because it's going to be their community.
Right, exactly.
Findings, any findings that were of significance?
Well, just sort of the eighth graders' understanding of gentrification, the idea that, they're learning about this topic now and it's sort of becoming a very hot button issue within the Bronx itself.
I brought it up about 2 minutes ago.
Right, exactly. And so for the school to learn about that and to sort of embrace that topic it's good for the dialogue.
I think it's wonderful, and those kids will remember it, and it'll make them maybe say, hey, I want to live here, that kind of thing. Were their impressions mostly positive?
Oh yeah, definitely.
That's great. That says a lot about their parents too.
Well, yeah,
right?
And just overall, Norwood is a good place to live. I'll say that objectively.
Absolutely.
It's a really good place to live. A lot of families.
Let's talk about criminal justice. I have interviewed Senator Jamal Bailey several times. He is kind of at the center of a lot of the reform in police laws coming out of and criminal justice laws and rules coming out of Albany. Talk about a little bit about the profile piece of Senator Bailey.
So Senator Bailey had held 2 hearings essentially on the state law 50A, which essentially would lift the confidentiality of NYPD personnel records. He essentially wants to repeal that. He's a prime sponsor. He also happens to be the chair of the Codes Committee, which would abolish that. And he actually really spoke a lot from personal experience, especially during the hearing. He essentially had mentioned that when he was younger, he had been stopped. What he felt was just kind of unlawfully, and he was young, and it left an impression on him growing up in the same district that he represents now.
I had heard that, and of course, having done television straight through the era of stop and frisk and everything else, I heard that, frankly, from the borough president when he was an assembly member. He had assembly plates, and he was pulled over, for want of a better term, harassed. I remember he told me this story, and he was like, I happen to be the assembly member in this area, and you're pulling me over, and I think it led to significant changes, at least in attitudes. So are the 50A law is in place, or it's about to be in place?
Oh no, it's in place. It's been in place for decades.
Right.
Now they're looking to just repeal that law because apparently it does not help court cases, especially for the defense attorneys who are trying to prepare their cases and not know too much about the officers who are testifying against their client.
All this is in the Norwood News. Dave, we could keep going. I could go page by page on everything, but we're essentially out of time. The Norwood News comes out on Thursdays. I mean, this will air Thursday night, so it'll
be out.
already be out. And thanks for always your great work and for joining us on the program. And I guess that's about it, right? Okay, we will say good night, and we will see you on Bronx Talk Monday night. Looks like we're putting a healthcare program together, but I'm not sure yet. Tune in Monday night at 9 on BronxNet's 67 or Fios 33, and we'll see you then. Good night.